Welcome to the How to Be Moderately Successful podcast. I'm your host, Mike Scott, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Nona Digital. This podcast is all about helping you to build better businesses, better FinTech products, and a better version of yourself. We get a lot of messages to thank us and our guests for the content that we put out, which I can only assume means that you're getting value from the podcast. If you'd like to support us, then please do this by giving us a rating and review. You'll be surprised at how much each one helps us. We set up a link to make this a bit easier because it's actually not that easy to give a rating and review. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/how to be moderately successful. We'll drop this link in the show notes too, and thank you in advance. Today's episode is sponsored by ourselves, Nona Digital. Building a FinTech business is difficult, and building the software that powers that business, that scales, and that your users love is very difficult. In today's competitive environment, getting your software built right really matters. But you also need to focus on building your business, your team, closing your next round, and making the impact that you need to make. And this is where Nona can help. With a strong track record of delivering scalable, intuitive software for FinTech companies around the world, we'll take away just some of your stress by making sure that your product is designed and built at the highest standards and by people that really care. We're small enough so that you're always close to the principles, but big enough to be able to deliver at the highest standards consistently without key person dependency. We've got deep expertise in FinTech and particularly in blockchain application development. And we also have a proven track record of expanding and evaluating internal tech teams and capabilities for our partners. So, if you would like to accelerate your FinTech project with a team of experts, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our site, www.nona.digital, to book a call directly with one of the principals or follow any of the contacts in the show notes. And now, on to the show. Today, my guest is Anthony Iorio, who is one impressive human. In 2013, Anthony funded and co-founded Ethereum, which is today a decentralized blockchain protocol that in just the last 24 hours would have successfully processed over 1.2 million transactions. The native cryptocurrency to Ethereum, Ether, now has a market cap of around $240 billion. Anthony has invested tens of millions of dollars in numerous industries, including blockchain, and has launched many companies himself. His current focus, and how he and I actually met, is as the founder and CEO of Decentral, a Toronto-based innovation hub and software development company focused on decentralized technologies. Decentral is the creator of the Jaxx Liberty wallet and platform, which has had literally millions of downloads with, as far as I know, zero marketing spend, which is just mind-blowing. Previously, Anthony was the Chief Digital Officer for the Toronto Stock Exchange and held an adjunct professor position at the University of Toronto. He stacked up a slew of awards, including EY's Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year Award, FinTech Leader of the Year Award, and Toronto's list of the 50 most influential people in 2018. Apart from his razor-sharp mind and ludicrously impressive career, Anthony's just a really nice guy and someone that I enjoy talking to. Welcome, Anthony. So glad you could make it.
Thanks. You just put a smile on my face at the end there. Thank you. That was a great intro. It's really nice to be with you and having a conversation with you for the next hour or so. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, looking forward to it. All right. So let's start sort of right at the beginning. Talk to me about what led up to the point that saw you in 2013 funding and co-founding Ethereum. Talk to me about how you got there and then how that all happened.
Sure. I've been into computers since I was 8 years old. I was born in 1975. When I was 8, it was really the dawn of the personal computing age. So my dad brought home an IBM PC Junior when I think it was around when I was 8 years old. And I was kind of just hooked on computers since then. Building computers, computer camp, just that became the obsession of mine through childhood. It was sports, computers, and reading were the three things that I really enjoyed doing. When I got in trouble, it would be the computer that was taken away from me. So I was just always the computer person in the family. Through my teenage years, and actually even before I was a teen, my first job was doing networking for a family friend who had a business doing networking for school boards here in Toronto, in Ontario, Canada here. So just enthralled by computers, by the hardware of computers, by the software. But I wasn't really, I didn't have the desire to be a developer when I grew up. And even though I did do quite a bit of programming work early on, My dad was an entrepreneur, problem solver, inventor, and I went the entrepreneur route and the business route in university, which I did in Toronto at Ryerson University. So I graduated with a business degree, but coming out of university and not being someone that really liked school too much, I did business and I did marketing just because it was something to do. It wasn't really something that I was passionate about. But over the next many years, I worked as a marketing director. I worked in the family business, which was a manufacturing company of sliding patio doors. Learned a lot of ins and outs of the business, of different areas, of hiring, of working in the office. Just a well-rounded entrepreneur in terms of many things there. I started a few business. My first business was doing web design back in the early 90s and graphic design. The family business sold in 2008. I had an opportunity to do something different because I didn't want to work with the company that was going to be purchasing it for my family. So I got into geothermal drilling. It was something that I wanted to do that was green and technology focused, and it involved me purchasing a very large drill from Italy. And the process involves drilling holes in the ground hundreds of feet deep in order to heat and cool buildings. So after doing a few IKEAs in Italy, I brought the drill back to Toronto and proceeded to do commercial projects and condominiums and houses, just because it was really the start for me of interest in how do we get off fossil fuels and how do we do things that are going to be more environmentally impactful, and how do I bring technology into the mix there. So it was around 2009 I started that, and then around 2011 there began to be a lot of red tape in the process of doing the geothermal drilling, and it was slowing down projects, and government got involved. It was really my first experience with government kind of taking something that really had great potential and getting in the way and implementing things that really made it just not feasible anymore to do the project. So I ended up exiting out of that, and around the same time, from 2005 to 2010, I'd owned a few properties, and I had experienced and looked at what had happened in the housing crisis and financial crisis in the U.S., and that was really a learning experience for me. I really delved into what had happened there, and I stumbled upon the Austrian School of Economics. I've always been a very freedom-oriented person. I never liked being told what to do. One of the reasons I never liked school. So it really aligned with me, this different way of thinking about economics that really put emphasis on sound money, put emphasis on creating value, really identified that the boom and bust cycles that had happened and that have happened prior, when money is not sound and when governments create inflation and get involved in the free markets, really leads to a lot of the problems that we saw back in 2008, 2009. And so I spent a couple of years studying economics. And this kind of took me up to 2012, where, okay, I had, background now as an entrepreneur, background in tech, computers, economics. But it's like, well, what can I do now to really help change things? And then I heard about Bitcoin. And it was the summer of 2012. And whereby back when the internet emerged, I really understood what was happening with the democratization of information, but I was a little too young and going through university at the time and high school that I wasn't really able to utilize it back then to my advantage. So fast forward to 2012, with the decades at the past of those things that I mentioned, really was turned into an amazing opportunity for me to say, this is something I'm really excited about. It's a way for me to be my own bank. It's a way for me to seek the freedom that I'd always wanted. It's a way for me to provide value and to start thinking, how can I take what I've learned and how can I bring what I'm excited about here to as many people as possible. And it was such a right time because in Toronto, there was no community. There was nothing going on for Bitcoin. And I was just so enthralled. And I said to myself, if there's nothing here, why don't I start it? So in 2012, I started the Toronto Bitcoin Meetup Group. I held my first event. Some notable people showed up. Vitalik Buterin was at my first event. Peter Todd was there. There was about 8 people. And from that point, the meetups just started growing. And I started to become a center of gravity in Toronto and started bringing people together, because when you can build a community or you're bringing people together, the ideas just start flourishing and growing. And the more people that are coming in, and when you're that person that's kind of bringing it together, it really does help you to advance of where you want to go in a certain industry. So it was just a perfect way for me to get to know people. And then I started a nonprofit organization that was national, which is called the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada, And that was my way to expand out and meet people across Canada. And then representing that organization, I started traveling around the world and started expanding my global network. And it's just amazing when you start meeting all these different people also enthused about similar technology or a similar sector, how the idea is to start flourishing and growing. I met a gentleman that we got together and we started creating our first business, which was a gambling site back in 2012. We exited that project 3 months later for all Bitcoin. And here I was making a small investment for $8,000 at around $10. I started out in 2012. And then after the sale of the company, which was for all Bitcoin, I ended up with like 3,000 Bitcoin very early on and became, a millionaire within a few months of starting in Bitcoin, because it proceeded to then get up to over, $1,000, $1,200 with the whole Mt. Gox ordeal. Came back down. But along the way, me and my partner we had done the gambling site realized that the wallet is really the interface for this whole technology. And just like the browser was for the internet, the wallet is what's needed for people to manage and navigate value and be able to move and manage value, just like the internet enabled the masses to manage and move information. So that kind of started me on my path of building all the tools needed that the internet needed for this new decentralized world. And we started building wallets in 2013, me and my partner. Fast forward to the end of 2013, I had been getting to know Vitalik Buterin very well. He had helped me on our wallet called CryptoKit. We were the first Chrome extension Bitcoin wallet back in 2013. So I got to know him traveling around the world. We would meet up at events, and he was writing for Bitcoin magazine at the time. And he would be interviewing me for different articles. And I just got to know him well, and I trusted him. And he was a very reliable person, and his writing was improving, and he was just super smart. And he had been traveling the world, dropped out of university, and working with different projects back in the day, like visiting the Mastercoin guys and visiting the BitShares guys and visiting different projects and realizing the deficiencies that they were having building on Bitcoin. And that really sparked the genesis of the white paper. And in the end of November 2013, he showed me the white paper. It was a little over my head, some of the stuff that was in there, which his stuff generally is for me. But to get validation, I showed it to my friend Charles Hoskinson. Charles had been working on the Bitcoin education project for the Bitcoin Foundation. Me working on the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada, we kind of had started communicating. He was helping out with some CryptoKit stuff that I was doing. Showed him the paper, and right away he was just floored. And I connected him with Vitalik, and then myself, Vitalik, Charles, Amir Chetrit, who was a gentleman that was part of the Colored Coin project, and then Mihai Alize, Vitalik's partner on Bitcoin magazine. The five of us got together and became the first founders of Ethereum in late 2013. And it really sparked and came out of Decentral, which was a physical Bitcoin Decentral, actually, which was a physical hub. I was just getting off the ground in downtown Toronto. And that was a place for us to do the meetups and a place to get together. And that really became the first home for Ethereum for the team. And then, the rest is really history. We ended up expanding the founding team out to 8, adding Jeffrey Wilkie, adding Gavin Wood, adding Joseph Lubin. Joseph Lubin, another Torontonian who was visiting Toronto at the time in 2013 when I was opening up Decentral, and he came to one of the meetups, and we got connected with him, and he joined the team soon after. And that's kind of the genesis of how it all started. We went on to raise $18 million in the largest crowdfunded project of all time. And then over the next year or so, there was a shift that happened. There was a real focus on the development of the actual product, and it saw Charles ended up leaving, and Joe ended up leaving to go start Consensus, and then Charles eventually started Cardano, and I left to continue on with what was Jax, which is and then Jax Liberty, which is kind of an interface that enables many different currencies to flourish and grow. And I realized that it's not just about Bitcoin. It's not just about Ethereum. There's going to be thousands of these things out there. And it's all about building tools that empower people to do certain things. And that's always been my mission, is to provide the tools that empower people to be in control of their digital lives. So I continued on to build the wallets. And then Vitalik stayed on with the project. Thousands of people have been involved with the project. And it really was a community effort to get everything off the ground. And Ethereum, as you mentioned, has gone on to be a $200+ billion project, and it's just amazing that I was able to be part of something so spectacular, and I really am thankful and grateful for that ride.
What a story, Anthony. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I usually interrupt a lot more, but I decided to just absolutely let you talk because that was amazing and really concise. I guess a question that I'm wondering is, you're sitting in Toronto 2013 with, you had no idea, I guess, as a group of people that all of you would become massively influential in this enormous world of cryptocurrency, because at that time it didn't really exist. Well, it did, but just in the form of Bitcoin. I know you haven't been involved since around 2015 actively in Ethereum, but you still keep an eye on it. Did you have any idea back then what it would become? When you're sitting around there at Decentral, what were your kind of wildest dreams sitting there with a group of friends going, well, there's this thing, it's amazing, there's a white paper, but it's going to be a $240 billion market cap and it's going to be doing millions of transactions a day. What did you imagine it to look like back then?
So we definitely were dreamers. It's not that I would say that we thought it would get to a certain point or it wouldn't, but we did know we had something very special, I believe. And I think the response of the community very early on with Ethereum and how the team grew and how the community grew very early on was something that was just remarkable. That I can't say we thought it would get to a $200 billion project. That just wasn't there. But we knew that it was something special, and we knew that we had an opportunity to create something that would have much more use and at the time even of something like Bitcoin. And I was everything to me was Bitcoin. It was my company was Bitcoin Decentral. And then I dropped the Bitcoin when we started doing Ethereum, because it would really open my eyes to much more after Bitcoin. There's Ethereum, and then wow, what's going to happen after this? So we were definitely dreamers, and we had it in our minds that this was going to be something special, and we had to execute and carry it out. But I think it was a culmination of a number of things that led to what it is that it is today. It's the smarts of the people that were part of the core project, and these are not just one-off things. These are people that have gone on to do amazing things afterwards. Pretty much everyone that was in the core founding team has done something that's been quite remarkable, that's keeping this moving along. So I think it was a combination of the right people, the right time. We were able to fund it ourselves until the crowd sale, so we didn't have to bring in any outside investors beforehand. Between myself and Joseph Lubin, we were able to get it funded for the months that was needed in order to prepare for the crowd sale. I think the decentralized nature of the organization and the structure of the protocol and everything really brought in people that were passionate developers, passionate communities. I think a lot of that has to do with Vitalik and the way he looks at things. So it's always been a developer-focused project. So I just think it's a culmination of many things that has led to the success of where it is right now. But also, who knows what it would have been if things were done a little bit differently. Yeah. So you never really know. All I know is that I'm just very fortunate and grateful of what it is right now, what it's become, for all the people that have contributed to it. And I'm really hoping that it's going to continue to soar. And, hopefully it's got some challengers that are going to come in and keep pushing it, which is great. Innovation and survival of the fittest is something that's amazing. But it has come out to something that's fantastic. And I don't think I would think that it's where it would be now. But I am very happy, and we did think that it was going to be something special, but never thought to this scale, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible, and I'll touch on something that I've noticed in that story and in your current situation as well, which obviously speaks to your ability to attract great talent. But we'll get there. So talk to me more about Jaxx Liberty and the Jaxx wallet. It's a pretty well-known wallet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's got millions of downloads, and yet you guys have done no marketing, from what I understand, which is amazing in and of itself. But it's more than just a wallet, if I understand correctly. It's a platform. It's a suite of tools. The wallet is kind of the manifestation of what you've done. Talk to me about it, what it looks like today, and where you're taking it.
Sure. So it's been 8 years of trial and error of building scalable, interoperable interfaces and backend infrastructures that's needed for the average person to be able to manage, send and receive their value, their digital assets. So it's been 8 years of infrastructure building, and we are just now getting into finally user acquisition and growth mode, which has never been a focus of ours. To build what we built has taken a lot of restarting, trying to piece together a lot of things as we went more multi-currency. You run into a lot of the same issues that crypto has, which is interoperability, scalability. We have to provide data information as these blocks are changing every few seconds to users all around the world in a very lightweight product. And I just think what we've done over the last 8 years has been really phenomenal. And we never wanted to get to the point that we would have so many issues as we scaled and tried to attract more users, that it really took us 8 years to build and to get to where we are. And I believe it would be impossible for any other team to kind of put together what it is we put together in even a couple of years. We identified everything the internet needed in order to get off the ground. So it needed the browser, right? It needed the interface for the masses. My dad, I always build stuff for my dad. I say he's the average person. So I want to take these technologies to the masses. And it's not for the hardcore Bitcoin people. That's not who my market is. My market is for the average person that is dabbling in Bitcoin or Ethereum, even though we support a number of different chains. Most of our market is the average person that wants to have a little bit of exposure to Bitcoin and Ethereum or something along those lines in top 10. That wants an easy to use application that isn't confusing to them. So back in 2013, we made our first play at a Bitcoin wallet. And through the years, we realized we had to also build akin to the cloud services. So the internet needed cloud services. It needed the AWS. It needed the services for the average person to be able, or the developers to start building on top without figuring out how to build their own infrastructure or their own servers and things like that. So we built the interface, which was the wallet. We built the cloud services, which is our blockchain as a service infrastructure that supports the front end. We also build a partnership network of services that our users can connect to do things like exchange and trading. That's kind of like the App Store. We build like a broker service or the Expedia to kind of give users access to different types of exchange services and things like that. And all the while we do it without having access to customer funds. So that's one of our principles. We never hold or have access to customer funds. The product can outlive us, which means that if we ever disappear, you can take your keys and import it into another software. All the principles that crypto really stands for is how I built my companies. And also along the way, I've done it with the principle of never raising capital and only funding things by myself. So that's a big thing that I've done. That
let me jump in on that, Anthony, because that's interesting. Sure. Sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting. You know, I interview and work with a lot of founders of varying types and philosophies, and it certainly isn't true to say that none of them sort of. It's hard to paint everyone with a brush, but generally speaking, people go and raise funding. People spend other people's money, right? It's easier to spend other people's money. And sure, it's a very expensive form of funding because giving away equity of something that you believe is valuable is very expensive. But talk to me more about why that's your philosophy. Talk to me more about why is it or why was it and continues to be important that you self-fund all of your companies? Is it about autonomy? Is it about not being beholden to people? Is it about being able to do things in the way that you believe is right, but other people might not believe is right? Like, just talk to me about the philosophy behind that.
Sure. And you hit a lot of the points right there. I learned well before Ethereum that I didn't want to have partners. With Ethereum, the opportunity to go was just so great for me, and I didn't have much of a say to be able to do that by myself. So I kind of went with that, realizing that there's going to be a bigger team, but understanding the challenges. And with Ethereum, we had a lot of decision-making problems. You had 8 people eventually that from different backgrounds, different experiences, different philosophical beliefs that were trying to get something off the ground, and we were consistently butting heads with things. So I had learned a while ago that I didn't want partners in projects, but that was just something that I couldn't pass on the opportunity there. So that's something that I went forward with. But I did realize that if I could do things on my own, that's the way I want to do it. Things take a lot of time. I can't be thinking about paying back investors or different strategies that investors might have for early returns or things like that. I like having the control of the situation, and I like creating my own game. When I do things that are asking others for something and bringing them in, I'm beholden to them or I owe them something, and I try to avoid that at all times. So for me, I can move at the pace that I want. I can do things at the time that I want. I can do things feeling that even if I mess up, it's my own money that I'm dealing with. So aside from having to borrow some money sometimes from family back in the day, heck, even with Ethereum, I had to borrow money from my dad at a point in time when we didn't have the funding and Bitcoin had tanked. But in general, think that if you can do things on your own and figure out models that you make work and grow with, it's much easier. You're not being slowed down by investors. You're not consistently going out there having to appease them. So it just works for me. And the whole idea as well of just not holding other people's money, it kind of aligns with the same type of thing. So it's worked really well for me. I do invest in other companies, and I understand for a lot of people that it would work differently. But I just found it so much easier for me to not have partners, use my own capital, make my own mistakes, sleep better at night because I'm not thinking, oh my God, I just did something, or I have these investors breathing down my neck. And that's just why I do what I do, and it's very much a principle based approach that I do with anything.
You're known as a very astute and capable investor. How do you approach, like when you have your investor hat on, so not your entrepreneur hat, when you're investing in other companies, what's your approach as an investor? Because you've said all these things, which I agree with, frankly, to keep your autonomy, to keep your creativity, do things the way and at the pace that you want to do them. But when you're allocating capital to somebody else, to another jockey, to another CEO doing something, what's your approach as an investor? Is it the same? Are you very hands off? Or do you invest because you've got a lot of capability to add to them, and then you become that investor to them that you don't want for you? Like how do you approach investing versus running your own companies?
It's really different depending on different cases. One thing I do try to do is try not to put pressure on any of the companies that I put money into for anything. I let other investors deal with the pressure for them. I kind of have always taken the approach that personal responsibility is really important to me. So when I give somebody money, I always assume it's lost, and I assume that I've made that decision and it's on me. It's not on them. I've made that decision. So generally in the last couple of years, I'm not investing very much. I'd rather be funding my own things, but I still have a number of investments that I've done over the years that, depending which project it is, some things I'm completely hands off. Some things I'm assisting them with because I can add value. But at the end of the day, I kind of just let them operate and run. And I want to be the person that's maybe would talk with other investors to say, hey, let's make sure that we're easing off on these guys a little bit. And I've taken some big hits. Of course, nobody is going to be 100% successful in things. And I've lost quite a bit of money on some big projects, and that's all just par for the course. So I do like to help when I can. I like to ensure that they know that I don't want to be pressuring them, and they need to focus on their mission and their goals. And I also let them know if something ever happens or something doesn't work out, that's on me. I did it, and you don't have to worry about things. But I'll learn those lessons, and then maybe in the future I'm going to reevaluate the people that I've done. But I never want to feel that there's a pressure on a team to do something. But I also will give feedback and give my thoughts on maybe things that I can help them with. But at the end of the day, I made that commitment. And a good example is Shift right now. SHYFT, it's a project that I invested in a few years ago. And the whole team there, or a lot of the team of principals, ended up being my old team. And from Decentral, they had kind of migrated out of my company over a few months, and they ended up forming a company on their own and then joining Shift. And then I became the biggest investor in the project. So I know the team, and I was able to work along with them rather than saying, I don't really like what you did there. I'm like, hey, I know what you guys are planning to do. And that became my biggest investment. And I'm still working with the guys on a regular basis right now. And they're out of Toronto here with a lot of the stuff they're doing, also out of the Caribbean. But, I like to turn things into opportunities. I like to take things that were lessons and mistakes and just take them as learning lessons. So each project is different. And at the end of the day, I just try to let them do what they have to do and help them when I can, and ensure that I'm not really causing any stress or aggravation on any of the projects that I have invested in.
So that's really interesting, and there's a theme with your stories, and it's not surprising. And what I'm hearing is it's all about people. I mean, it always is, right? Like with investments. But I mean, you speak about your earlier days with who you surrounded yourself with. You speak about the team that you brought together for Ethereum. You speak about this team that left Decentral and went to Shift and is doing amazing things. And I remember with our first conversation or second conversation, I seem to remember you telling me that the team for the Jax Liberty team is really small. If memory serves, it's like 8 people. Is that correct? It's
five
people. 5 people. I mean, that's even more to my point. I mean, that is really...
We used to be 60.
Used to be 60, right? So
yeah.
So you're a really small, tight-knit team. I seem to remember you telling me how, I think they were at your house at the time we were speaking or something. It was such a cool vibe. And you've built this wallet, you've built this infrastructure with literally millions of downloads with a tiny team, like a tiny core team. And I'm sure you work with partners and what have you, but it's still a really small team. And that's really impressive. Like, to me, that speaks a lot about how you attract the right people and how you bring the most out of the people that you're working with. So talk to me about like your approach to attracting great talent and great people and how you get the best out of these people, because you clearly have a knack for doing this. So I'd love to hear about your sort of philosophy and process and strategy there.
So over the 8 years, we've gone through a lot of people at Decentral. As I mentioned, at one time we had 60 back in 2017, and I realized as I became overwhelmed with that amount of people and managing that it's not something I wanted to do. So the last few years has been focused on infrastructure building and automation and being able to do more with less people that we have. And right now, we're growing phenomenally, and we literally have 1.5 developers, one full-time guy that kind of runs everything for us. And we can do that because our infrastructure just works now. It doesn't need to be touched. Like literally, except where we're changing the daemons every once in a while when there's an update to the daemons, we've built infrastructure that just a few years ago we would have said, oh my God, this is the dream setup that we have. It's been running for over 1.5 years, our new infrastructure, and we don't touch it whatsoever. And that's very remarkable because it's really unheard of in a space to not have to be resetting things or doing things on a daily basis. So we used to have a team that would be dedicated to running our infrastructure. Now it literally just runs, it scales, it deploys, it'll increase new instances. It's just amazing. And because we've spent the years and years building the interface and building everything and had big developer teams, we're now at the point where we don't have to do much more, and we can now just focus on scaling. So we did have a lot of people to build up and build everything we've done over 8 years, but now we can use some outside services to work on our growth or work on our data analysis or attribution software. We're working with you guys to help us with some of our new additions of some of the coins. So, and that's been phenomenal working with your team. And it's just so much easier that I can have 4 or 5 people that I'm dealing with a day-to-day basis than such a massive team. And yet we're still able to get the scaling and the thousands of new users a day that we're doing. And it's been learning lessons where I identified I didn't want to do what I was doing in the past. How do we automate and grow even more with less? And that's what we've done. I mean, we had a burn rate of 800K a month at one time. And we're just at a fraction of that right now. And we have new opportunities to take our clouds or our blockchain as a service infrastructure and start offering it to the world with all the different chains that we support. So it's been learning lessons and figuring out visualization of where do I want to be and how do I get there. And that's really how everything's been. It's where do I want to be in the crypto space? How do I get there? Now beyond crypto, what I want to do there and how am I going to get there? It's really visualization and then problem solving to piece together all of the variables that you can in many ways to be able to get to that end game. And that's what I think I'm good at. That's I think the thing that I can excel at is problem solving and being able to piece together so many things that give the results. And when you're doing things to create win-win-wins for everybody, all stakeholders, and when you remove negativity from yourself and your vocabulary and everything, what's left is positivity and optimism and bringing people together in unity. And that's what I think that I'm here to do, is to unite people using my problem solving to better people's lives. And in general, just be of service to people is really what I've kind of figured over the last couple of years is really my longer term goals.
You said something almost in passing there, and it's so important, and it's kind of like, I think you almost said it's just about visualizing where you want to get there, where you want to be, and then figuring out how to get there. But I mean, that is so difficult, right? Like that is what everybody's trying to do in business, and so few get right. And I've actually been asked to give a talk to the Founders Institute cohort on vision. And I was doing some slides today and talking about it. And I was like, it's actually really simple. It's not easy, but it's really simple. You've got to get really clear on exactly where you want to go. And you got to break it down in how you're going to get there and talk about 3 years, 1 year, 90 days, this week, today, what I'm doing right now. But it's so simple, but it is so difficult. And clearly you are very good at that because, I'm seeing this repeating cycle, and the next chapter of your life, which we'll speak about in a minute, is going to be really interesting because shifting from commercial, let's say, profit-driven enterprises into philanthropic, it could be quite different and difficult, but we'll get to that in a minute. I want to sort of tie off on a couple of things. So back to sort of the business world before we get into the philanthropic world. you've had literally millions of downloads. And I have two questions here. One, I understand you've done that with very little or no marketing. And two, there's a sort of a tied in question here, which is with so many wallet options today. Now, I recognize that when you built Jaxx, there probably weren't that many options. In fact, you were probably the first, if not one of the first. But today, there's a bunch. With so many wallet options, why do people choose yours? So it's kind of like a double-sided question. How have you got millions of downloads without a big, thick marketing campaign? Similar kind of question. Why are people choosing yours over all the other options?
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of choices out there right now, and a lot of great choices. There's companies like Exodus that have been around for a while. Have a lot of respect for them. Edge Wallet, blockchain. There's just so many of them that are out there. And yeah, you're almost in the browser setup back in the day where you had Netscape and you have Internet Explorer and you have all these other different ones. And it's, well, why are people choosing it? So we are not the largest. People do choose us, I think, a lot because word of mouth. That's our biggest, I think, new user base is coming along through word of mouth. Because we're global, we don't hold customer funds. We don't have the regulatory burden of being restricted within a certain country. So we're in 220 plus countries with our users right now. And because of our partner network, we enable our users to buy and trade crypto via our partners inside of Jaxx Liberty. So it's really an all-in-one, very simple to use interface that's cross-platform, supports many different coins. So I think we've become a standard, like a lot of the other guys have been, and it's word of mouth. And over the years, trust is obviously a massive thing. Trust, especially in wallets, you're going to want one that's been around for a very long time because there are a lot of scam products out there and different things. In terms of the marketing, we are just starting our growth. We've set up all of our data infrastructure, our attribution software to get ready to scale and grow now. So we're starting to put spend now. Up until this point, we had zero spend. We hadn't a few years ago done a little bit of advertising, but we focused on infrastructure the last couple of years. So now we're starting to put dollars forward and going to start seeing the results. And I'm very optimistic of where that's going to go, because getting as high as 7,000 to 8,000 new users a day, which is what we've gotten over the last couple of months, we settle around usually 2,000 to 4,000 new users a day. But once we can start putting forward efforts to attract those users and then direct them to our partners, that's kind of our metric, is how can we get our partners engaged with our users? I think the sky's the limit. So I think it's a matter of trust. It's a matter of the ease of use. It's a matter of the word of mouth. It's a matter of potentially people understanding I've been in the space a very long time. So that gives them a little bit of confidence. It's the fact that we're building for the average user and not getting complex into DeFi. We're not getting complex into certain things that we think would just confuse our user base. So I think it's a combination of those things that why people choose us. But by no means are we the largest wallet out there. And I know that there's other products out there that are getting a lot of the mind share. But I think it's because they're doing the marketing initiatives, and that's something we're just starting up right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's just I was kind of giggling to myself because it's like 7,000 to 8,000 users a day, and you say you're going to start ramping up and scaling. I mean, I love that. 7,000 to 8,000 users a day. That's scaling.
That's our peak. We're doing between like 2,000 and 4,000 users a day right now.
But still, I mean, it's a question of scale, right? And I just love that attitude. It's kind of like even 2,000 users a day, 2,000 to 4,000 users. That is a ton of users. Yet in your mind, you're just going to start scaling and growing and investing in growth, which I love the attitude.
And we're going to be targeting in on what is the type of user that's going to be working with our partners. So it's really working to narrow the specs of these users so the ones that are coming in are the ones that are going to be using our partner products. And that's what's exciting, is how can we really define narrowly what is the best Jaxx user, and then do our initiatives that are going to attract those in. So it is fun to get into growth mode. I've never scaled a company before and never grown to this extent with a company. So I'm really excited to see what we can do. And then eventually my goal is to sell the company.
I love that. So this is a bit of a selfish question because it's where we play. As you know, we work with your team, and it's great. We're very privileged to do that. But I want to get a lens into your thinking. So you're a founder. You're not a developer, but you're super tech. I mean, you've been involved in tech your whole life. You're an investor. You're an entrepreneur. So you've got a great lens into what is really necessary to make these things work. You've had big teams. You've had small teams. With that in mind, when does it make sense to keep all of your tech capability in-house? And when does it make sense to work with a partner like us? I mean, clearly you do work with outsourced partners. It's clearly part of your strategy. But when does it make sense to insource versus outsource? And what do you look for with a partner?
I think it really depends. It depends. Do you need someone that's just going to be in for a couple of weeks? Do you need someone for a longer term? I have really shifted over the last few years in my principles on things such as we used to have an office. I was very big on everybody working the same place, same time, same hours, morning stand-up meetings. That was just what I was known for, was the efficiencies of being able to have, I need to see someone. I just say their name and they're there. And a year before COVID hit, we ended up getting rid of the office space and trying remotely, because we were between offices. We were going to move to a new place, but that kind of fell through, and we ended up getting out of a lease, and we were kind of stuck for a while. And we started working remotely, and it started working, and it started. Everybody seemed to be a little happier that they didn't necessarily come into an office sometimes, and we still made sure that we had the efficiencies that we needed, because I would ensure that everybody's still on a call all day, that if I still needed to speak to someone, I could just say their name and they're there. So we were able to, and I was able to loosen up a bit on the way I looked at having a physical office. So it actually helped us to transition into COVID, in fact, because we were a year early of getting all prepared and getting set up. So when COVID hit, it actually was something that it didn't really impact us too much. So I really switched on that. I also had gone from very early in the days, we did some contracting work with some developers, Coin Fabric out of Argentina, and they did a lot of our backend infrastructure. And then I really went with in-house devs for a while. But as we started working more remotely, it opened up a few things for me, and it opened up the ability, well, if these guys are working remotely and it's working really well, why can't I have some other teams that are working with us remotely and doing things? So it's a matter of me learning, changing, creating better efficiencies, thinking I'd rather outsource to specialists when I need them if I can get good teams. And it's all about finding the right teams. Like we've had a great relationship. You guys have delivered on time. There's been no issues. It's been in fact, we're slowing you guys down with certain things right now that we're doing. But if you can find the right team, I don't think that it's a one way or the other. You could also find some great internal people. So I don't think it's a black or white thing. I think there's a lot of in between there. And I think sometimes fits to bring in a new developer, sometimes fits to contract. Right now, my focus is more on contract. We've got data scientists we're outsourcing right now as a contractor. We've got data architect. We got a growth team out of New York that we're working with, PR company that we're going to start working with. So we're going more the outsourcing route right now and letting them be the specialists in certain areas while we're kind of the command center and doing it. So I don't see myself hiring more people right now as full-time people. And I think more and more doing some of the outsourcing is kind of the direction I'd like to go right now with contractors as we're scaling and growing.
Yeah, we're seeing it more and more, like just all around the world. We've been working with remote clients for years, and the openness to sort of keeping a very core tight team and then working with partners, specialists around it is becoming more and more and more. It's not a dangerous thing anymore, provided you can find the right partner with the right culture fit and the right attitude and the right value fit and all those things, which is difficult, but it's also difficult to hire people. It's no more difficult than that.
It's also one other thing I didn't mention. It's also the concern of some of the tech that you might be working with that is pretty groundbreaking stuff. Like what we've built in our infrastructure, our indexing systems for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the chains. We can index Ethereum in one day. We can literally index the entire chain, which was, we spent a month trying to index Bitcoin Cash back in the day when that split. And it was a disaster because the services weren't there to handle it. But over the years, we've been able to do things that literally can now index Ethereum, Bitcoin in a single day because of what we've been able to learn and bring together. So sometimes there is a little bit of risk of the stuff that we built being so forward thinking that you want to work with teams also you can trust and get to know. And sometimes that might be a little bit of, hey, let's keep part of this internally right now that we can focus and we can do on this part. And we'll just get them to work on certain things as well. So that is a consideration as well. And I love to be open with teams, and I don't like to hold things back. But there's certain things that you got to build trust with first and ensure that you feel comfortable with some of the tech you might be providing, because a lot of it just basically here's everything we've got. We'll work on that. And that could be something that gets out and exposed. So that's also another consideration.
Yeah, trust is super important. Absolutely, especially when you're doing stuff like you're doing, which is literally writing the book for the first time in certain areas. So we're getting close to running out of time. So I want to move to some more sort of generic type questions with shorter questions. So you're getting a hell of a lot done. You've done a lot in your life. I can just see you're a very mentally active person, which I can relate to. But do you have any habits or routines that you rely on to help you focus and to give you optimal performance, like on a daily basis?
Yeah, definitely. I'm up by usually 3:00 in the morning.
Hold on, sorry, what? You're up by 3:00 in the morning?
Yeah.
That's nuts.
I go to bed around 9 is my ideal time to go to bed, and I'm up at 3. I find I need that 3 to 8 o'clock period to myself without the distractions to get through the little things and to kind of putter around as well and have that time to myself when I'm not being disturbed, where there's nothing else going on. I can easily catch up with all my emails. I can have a coffee. I can go for a drive. That's really an important part of my life, because without that, I'd be overwhelmed. It's all about balancing. And the more you do something, the more you're involved in something, that's what you become. If I was literally to just get up in the morning and try to hit the day, or just even take an hour or two before I get going, I don't have the time to really collect my thoughts and be in peace in my head, because it's just nonstop, and the bombardment of information and stimuli coming from exterior sources really doesn't give my mind the opportunity to think through and go through what I need. So I'd say the most important thing that I do is go to bed early and get up super early to have time for myself. And I'm talking a good 5 hours before anything really starts happening. So that's really the big thing.
That's really intense. I mean, look, I get up at 5:30 and I relate to that, but I need like 2 hours, not 5, but I think your mind is probably running at 3 times my speed of my mind. But my question is actually not so much about that, because I get that. My question is more like 9 to 3 is 6 hours of sleep. Is 6 hours of sleep enough for you? Does that do it for you?
Yeah, that's pretty good. And I'll try to stop around 4 or 5 in the evening. And then I love cooking, so I'll spend a couple hours cooking, and that's kind of my meditation chill time. On the weekends, it's changed a little bit. I've gotten a little bit busier, but generally cleaning my place is my meditation as well. I enjoy cleaning my condo, cleaning my place. It's not a small place, but it's something that I don't like just meditating and doing nothing, but I do kind of like cleaning and refreshing things and just taking time to care for my space. And so that's usually important for me on the weekends as well. I try not to do any work on the weekends, except if it's maybe some brainstorming sessions or whiteboarding stuff that I'll do. But in general, it's the harmony and balance that I need to find between work and life. And that's something that I've struggled with over the years. And it's really been a main focus for me the last couple of years. It's you go up a mountain and then you have the downturns and I get overwhelmed and I've taken on too much. And then I'll go through the same system again. So the last 2 years, the question has been, how do I do the greater, bigger things that I want to do while staying in the state of harmony and balance between what it is I want to achieve and ensuring my mind is not going to get overwhelmed, because my mind is very analytical. I'm always questioning why with everything, and it can drive people nuts and drives me nuts. But it's why is that like that? Is there a better way to do things? And how do we get there? That's just a constant thing in my head, whether I walk into a restaurant and say, hey, why was I greeted like that? Is there a better way the host can greet me? Is there a better way the chef could maybe be a singing chef? All these different things, and I'm always looking to create innovation and say, is there a better way to do things? And it all leads up to problem solving and trying to get up to as close to 100% of a perfect formula with anything that I do. And that requires levels and layers and piecing stuff together. So my mind is quite active, and I need to ensure that I give it the break and rest that it needs to regenerate. And I don't want to get to the point that I can't take on massive things that I want to do to help the world if my mind isn't ready there. So I've really been trying to get myself established in a way that I am getting the rest it needs. I'm doing things that are going to help me to get to where I want to go and stay at that balance, that I'm not getting overwhelmed, because that has been a big problem in my life, is the overwhelmingness that's made me, I just don't want to do anything, and I need time to regenerate, and that's not good. So I got to kind of stay on
fully relate to that, but I love your system. Next question: what scares you in business?
So I've determined the biggest problem I believe the world has is the maximizing shareholder returns. I think that the constant month after month trying to appease shareholders and trying to squeeze businesses to provide more returns is leading to a detriment for the planet and for people. And that really I've determined is the biggest problem the world has. So I thought about it quite a lot, and that's really where my future goal is, to provide a new means to showcase for those that are seeking the maximizing shareholder returns that you'll get what you want if you shift your focus towards being of service to others and figuring out how to create the most amount of positive impact. And that's really what my next project is that I'm going to be working on, and my problem solving formulas kind of deal with that. Is it's okay to maximize shareholder returns, but when you're doing it at a detriment to stakeholders that you're not putting into your equation, you're going to be getting more competitors. You're going to be getting more people that aren't aligned with what it is you're doing, because most people don't have the problem solving capabilities to think beyond their business models that they have right now. It's really problem solving is the biggest issue that I see, where people get stuck in that's always been that way. That's the way it's always going to be. And their models are deficient. They might be 50% efficient, but they got to get towards 100. So my formulas revolve around identifying stakeholders in a problem and figuring out how to create win-win-win-win-win-win-wins for all stakeholders in the equation, so that everybody's on your side and everybody realizes that when they join you in your mission, their life gets better. Right now, there's just too many projects and businesses where are seeking this constant return of profits, but it's coming at a detriment to the planet and to other people. And that's a deficient model. So my goal is to bring a new way of looking at it that says you'll get what you want if you're looking to appease all stakeholders in the mix. And that's really my passion, and where I'm going to be taking my next projects is creating that change, and not just saying there's a problem, but here's a solution on how to solve that problem.
I love that. We're going to run out of time in this episode to get into that, but I think there's definitely an opportunity for a second episode. I know you're going to have a successful end to the story with Jax, and I know you're going to get on to do this. And when you're in that, I'd love to get you back on to circle back onto this, because that's super exciting. It reminds me of something my dad used to say to us, and he used to say, do whatever you want in the world that you enjoy and that is useful to others, and that's all that matters. And it's just stuck with me. Like, as a kid, I can just remember him saying that. Do whatever you want. Like, sweep the streets if that's what you want to do. If you enjoy that, it's useful to others, do that. But always focus on those two things.
I'd love to do a second part. It seems to be a reoccurring thing that I'm doing with the podcast here. And maybe we can just, I took time over the last couple of years to figure out my what, my why, and my how. And that's really something I want to bring to youth. And I think bringing and creating problem solvers at a very young age is something that the world would really benefit from. So my goal that I've kind of figured out is to bring to the youth the concept of figuring out what it is you're good at. Okay, sorry, you're figuring out your what it is you want to do. Why do you want to do that? So the what, the why, and then how are you going to do that? And for me, I figured out that my what is to be of service to the world. My why is because it makes me happy. And the how is my perfect formula, which is my problem-solving models that I think I need to bring to the world in order to be the most amount of value and solve the most amount of problems and improve people's lives. So maybe that's a discussion for the future, because that's really is towards that model and philanthropy, and using the money that I've been able to do when I sell my company and other stuff to put that all towards solving the problems that I see that I think I can help with.
And I think we can derail, and I mustn't, because I must stay disciplined here. But it starts with the schooling system, and I'd love to get into that. I've got a young daughter who's at the Waldorf school, which is really not mainstream, but I love the way that they do certain things at a kindergarten level, because she's still at kindy. And I'm just beginning to see how things are broken, how the schooling system is broken, and you kind of wonder why, as you say, why it's all about maximizing shareholder value. Well, it's no surprise, because there's been no teaching and no expansion of other ways to do things through the schooling system. But I'm going to move on from that, because otherwise we're just going to keep talking about that. We'll do another episode. Next question. What content are you currently consuming?
Podcasts is generally what I do. There's one called Behind Greatness, which is one out of Toronto here, done by an organization called Inspire North. I like the Knowledge Project, which is another one out of Ottawa here in Canada. So I'm also enjoying. There's one called Over the Wall. I think it's Rob Locasio, and it had a great one with Ed Norton recently, and I'm going to be on that one coming up soon. And just people, and speaking to as many people or listening to as many people that have aligned thinking that resonates with me, and listening to positive people, optimistic people that, as much learning as I can do of people that I look up to and I hear. So yeah, pretty much podcasts for me, a number of podcasts that I listen to.
What's the last book that you read cover to cover?
The last one that I read was Daily Stoic. I think that's one of my staple books. It's got 365 meditations. There you go. There's a journal for the Daily Stoic. Yeah, I love just going back to the basics of a life lesson each day that I can kind of think about and meditate on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So that's one that I think has been really important. It helps me stay grounded and helps me kind of get back to the basics and the simple things. So Daily Stoic is a book that I bought lots of and give it out to people. So that's probably the book that's really important to me.
I fully resonate. I mean, I've got a lot of Ryan Holiday's work there, but what I actually bought recently was going to the source, Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Yeah. Because that's obviously what he references a lot in Epictetus and Seneca. Yeah. And I just thought, well, let me start reading the source, and it's pretty intense, but it's just amazing. But I love what he's done in putting into a daily formula. So next question. What is something that you are doing in the next 7 days to improve yourself or your craft?
Oh, interesting. I think it's refining the white paper that I've got coming out on Perfect Formula. It's about 40 pages right now. I want to simplify it down to about 15 to 20. And the model is really based on my principles, tools, and processes that I've been able to put together over the years that gives me the opportunity to take any micro or macro problem and really come up with a better opportunity to solve it than any other model that I've seen out there. So it's really getting that finished and out there to the world is really my goal, and getting it peer reviewed, that I can really put that out to the world, because that's really everything that I've done revolves around this process. And over the last couple of years, I've put it into a formula and put it into a general problem solving formula, this whole thing. And I need to get others to take a look at it and then maybe start utilizing that, because it really has been something. It's been a lifelong of problem solving, journey of problem solving. And I finally put it down on paper, and I think I need to get that out.
We've spoken about a lot of things today, Anthony. We've spoken about pre-Ethereum, post-Ethereum, Ethereum. We've spoken about Jax. We've spoken about your philanthropic work that you want to do. We've bounced around a lot. If there's one thing that you want the listeners to leave with, what is that one thing that you want them to take away with them?
It's really something that I've thought over the last week, that it's not just what I figured out with my what, my why, my how, but it's how can I get others to think about that and maybe consider figuring out how they're going to come up with their what, their why, and their how. It does start, I think, with the why. And if the why with everything you're doing it makes you happy, it's figuring out what it is that makes you happy. And then how do you utilize what you're good at or what you can bring in the world to figure out how you're going to provide value doing that. In return, that to me, it all comes down to being of service. That's what I figured out. Maybe along the journeys of people's lives, it's going to be other things. But I think at the end of the day, after a while, most people are going to realize is, you have them, you can get the monetary things, you can get the material things, but at the end of the day, I've always loved to create experiences for people. And I've always loved to do things that put a smile on someone's face. So the being of service for me, and then doing it because it makes me happy, and then using my problem solving capabilities to kind of do that to the most amount of people is what I've figured out. And that's really my mission in life now. So maybe it's assisting and helping other people to figure out, it's the what is it I want to do? Why do I want to do it? And how am I going to do it? So that would be the parting words that I would maybe like to instill in people, is figuring that out.
Anthony, it's been great chatting with you. Do you like to be contacted and followed? And if you do, how can the listeners contact or follow you?
Sure. A few years ago, I really started getting off of social media. Twitter is probably the best way. I don't check it very often, but that's the best way to maybe contact me. And it's Iorio, at Iorio Anthony. So it's DIIORIOANTHONY is probably the best way through Twitter. And that's the easiest thing. I really try to stay focused, and I really don't get lost in social media very often.
Anthony, thanks so much for making the time. It's been really awesome having you on the show. Your insights, I usually ask a lot more questions, but I was actually quite captivated with just literally listening to you. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thanks to your team. And I look forward to doing further projects with you guys. And it's really been a great interview. Thanks so much.
Awesome. To the listeners, I hope you got some value from today's episode with Anthony Iorio. I definitely did. I think my main takeaway, there's a lot, but I think if I have to kind of pick one, I'm just running through in my own mind, because I have morning routines and things, but Anthony's 5-hour block in the middle of the night, basically, to give his brain the time and nurturing it deserves it's really gotten through to me. I'm going to really give some thought into like, how am I giving my brain the time to recover? It's playing in my mind there. And thanks for listening to the How to Be Moderately Successful podcast. If you have a fintech project that you would like to accelerate with a partner that will take care of your design and development to allow you to focus on your area of genius, we'd love to help you. Head over to our website, www.nona.digital, to book a call with one of our principals or follow any of the contacts in the show notes. And I'll be back next week with another episode to help you build better businesses, better fintech products, and a better you.